we hack the code and flip the tag. Where cliches come to retire. Drop that beat, turn down to fire. Say what's real, make fears take a seat. Unconventional wisdom, dancing on your feet. Hey.
Hello and welcome to Unconventional Wisdom, about conventional wisdom. I am your host, Kim Miller-Hershon. I am here today with John Cousins. I can't wait for you to meet him. But before I even give him a chance to talk, let me tell you a little bit about him. So he is an investor, a tech founder, and the best-selling author of Corporate Finance ASAP. And can you believe this? Over 60 other books. John is the founder of NBA ASAP, which provides training to individuals, over 30,000 students in 165 countries. Very cool. And corporations like Adidas, Apple, General Mills, Kaiser Permanente, Lyft, PayPal, Pinterest, Mercedes-Benz, and Volkswagen. And he has taught NBA students at universities all over the world. So first of all, welcome, John.
Oh, hi, Kim. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much. Thanks for the great introduction.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. It was my pleasure. Fun accolades there. So before we get into the content, I would like to know, and the audience is dying to know, about some of your hobbies. So a little bird told me that you are a musician. Can you tell us about that?
The little bird was right. And I love all kinds of music. And I'm a big pop music aficionado for the last half a century. Oh my gosh. But I'm a jazz musician primarily. And it's interesting you say a little bird because Bird was Charlie Parker's nickname. And he's basically the geniuses that invented the kind of jazz that I play. And I'm primarily a jazz piano player. But basically, it's really interesting with jazz music. It's improvisational, so everybody thinks it's just like free form. You just do what you feel, man. But it's very structured, actually, and it's structured in the way that you structure the song forms primarily, and then those are structured by a certain amount of bars that get repeated over and over. Everybody familiar with the song structure, and then you play whatever the chords are that make that up. You play different scales and things over those chords, and that's what you use to improvise on. And so it is improvisational, but it's within these constraints and bounded, unless it's freeform jazz, which is a thing that happened in the 60s and all, but it's pretty conformed in that way. And really what happened.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me ask you a really quick question.
Yeah.
Because, of course, I get all the source of news in my life from Instagram. I read recently a post, which I don't know that this is true, but it made me think about what you were just talking about. So I don't know how many years ago it was, Ed Sheeran got sued by a song saying that he had stolen his music, right? And Ed Sheeran was just beside himself, right? Because, and he even said things like, if I lose this lawsuit, then I'm done with music. And as I understand it, he won that case very much about what you are just talking about, that there's four main chords make the base of almost all pop songs. And that actually there was a comedy trio that did a whole bit.
I've seen that, yeah, and it's a very good point. There's this old adage in the music business: if you have a hit, you're going to get a writ. That they're going to say that you copied my music. And George Harrison lost a really big case way back in the day for his song "My Sweet Lord." They said it was too much like "She's So Fine." I forget what the girl group was in the early '60s that did that song. And yeah, so that happens a lot. And you're right, I've seen that thing. It's really interesting. Yeah, it's 3 or 4 chords, and it's a chord progression. And most pop songs are built on that type of chord progression. It's interesting. In jazz, they did that too. There's a lot of songs that are called contrafacts. And there's songs that they used to, in the day, and really the golden age of jazz, the kind of jazz, small combo jazz, was pretty much between right after World War II, say 1946, but really up around 1950 to maybe 1965. That was like the golden age. And we still play that same kind of stuff, and that's considered modern jazz. It didn't really arguably progress much past that. It went into funk and fusion and more rock influences, but that's really the golden age of jazz. And these contrafacts, the way they used to do the record dates and stuff like for these great roulette and these other prestige, these big labels at the time, was they just get musicians together. They have a pickup band kind of thing. They'd have the marquee guy, say a Charlie Parker, whoever it was going to be, even Miles Davis and stuff at that time. And so all the musicians knew how to blow over these certain song formats. And the thing that you can't copyright is the melody. That is copyrightable. But the chords are open to anybody can use them. So they would take the chords from a well-known song and they'd write what they called a contrafact melody, and that's what the main musician would blow over what they call the head, the first part, and then all the other musicians could improvise their parts over a song format that they were familiar with. They call them rhythm changes. It's the song by Gershwin called I Got Rhythm. Those changes, there are hundreds of jazz tunes written for that chord progression. They call them rhythm changes. And somebody just call out rhythm changes in B flat, and boom, everybody's off and playing it because you know that song format. Yeah. So it's constructed in that fashion. That's what I was saying about the structure these things have. And then there's all these ways that then jazz musicians, you learn how to alter the chords, alter the form, and things like that. And then everybody has to be heads up and listening and playing off of those kind of things. And that's where the conversations really begin. And interestingly enough, there's jazz tunes that were written as jazz tunes in that time. But really what happened with a lot of tunes in this way, they had to pick changes that everybody knew. They went back to what they call the Great American Song. And the Great American songs of the 20s and 30s. In the 20s, it was the Broadway musicals, and in the 30s went to the Hollywood musicals. So it's those kind of guys, Rodgers and Hart, Cole Porter, the Gershwin brothers, those kind of heroes. And then those songs got a rebirth in the 1950s, basically, when people started using those as blowing vehicles for their jazz improvisations. And guys like Miles Davis was really the guy who started that and basically stripped these tunes down to their sort of elemental form and then made them into these beautiful pieces that were cool for vehicles for modern jazz. And so that's what I study. You said I read a lot of books. I've written 2 on Miles Davis, for one thing, and 1 on the Great American Songbook, that whole history of how these tunes have been transformed, even to today with Diana Krall and these others who play those kind of Great American Songbook type of songs. But yeah, I feel for Ed Sheeran, but it's basically everybody that's gotten famous, somebody's going to try to shake the tree with a lawsuit to try to say, hey, it was like my song. And then it gets into a whole kind of problem. An interesting thing with my playing too, I decided to study jazz, and I always wanted to, and I always wanted to play piano because it's basically an instrument that you can play by yourself. And you can accompany yourself singing. You learn to play the tuba or something, and it's not going to be as satisfying to have a solo gig or something. But with piano, you can. It's almost orchestral. You can play, the left hand is the chords or the bass line, and the right hand is the melody or the improvisational line. And you can do lots of things just by yourself, which is incredibly satisfying. The other reason I really liked jazz was that once you know the format and you know all these different songs, everybody knows the repertoire. And so anybody can call it a song and the whole band will know how to play. The bass player will know it. You count out a tempo, the drummer knows, right? And then whatever the other instruments are, know the songs and know the tunes. So there's this whole repertoire. It's common to everyone. And it's like almost like a pickup basketball game or something. You can play basketball 3-on-3 or 2-on-2 or whatever, and everybody knows how to play, and boom, you can just start a game, which you can't really do with baseball or football or something else. And jazz is like that. It's not rock bands, they're garage bands. They rehearse the same things over and over, and they just know their songs. This is something where you can just pick up with guys you've never played with before, and suddenly everybody knows the tunes, and you're off and running, and it's an incredible way to communicate. So I really liked that idea of it too, that it was a solo instrument, and it was easy to play in ensembles. And that's actually what happened as I went through it, is those things were really true, and as I learned them. And when I was younger, when I was a teen and even a young, I really wanted to be, obviously, there was a part of me wanted to be a rock star. And I picked up the guitar and really learned the guitar. But when you learn the guitar, it's not an intuitive instrument like the graphical layout of a piano. And so I learned these things, and you learn it by patterns and things like that. You don't really understand functional harmony. And so when I started to play jazz and study jazz, I really had to dig in and understand functional harmony, how songs work, how they're put together, how tension is built, and then how tension is released. And that's really all music is. You go away from home, you come back to home. You create tension, you release that tension. And everybody intuitively knows that. And so after I studied that for a decade or so, and I started to get facile in that, I thought I have guitar chops because I played all the time as a younger person, but I really didn't understand music. Now I understand music, how the chords fit together, what to do. Let me just go back. And I went back to my guitar, and all of a sudden, my guitar playing was way better than it ever
Mm.
been. It was almost like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, where all of a sudden he goes, I know Kung Fu, because it was downloaded into his brain. It felt like that. Suddenly I was like, I can do something that I never could do before by moving away from it and then coming back to it with a skill set that was transferable. And it was a really thrilling moment in my life. It's, oh my gosh, I know Kung Fu. I know how to play the guitar now. And so that was a very satisfying sort of byproduct of my learning to play piano. And that type of even getting into thinking about trying to hack how I learn, trying to, how am I going to learn this big giant subject, break it down. So I tried videos and CDs and play along CDs and books and everything else. And little by little, each thing taught me something, but it was a really interesting exercise. I was old enough. I was in my 30s when I started to do that. An exercise in how can I best hack how I learn so that I can learn this quickly and also learn it well. And also part of it is there's no fast track to doing it. One of my teachers once said, I had this guy at Wall Street. I used to live in New York. And he said, there's this Wall Street guy. And he came to me and said, how many hours do I have to before I can learn to play the jazz piano? And he said, it's going to take you quite a few hours. And they mapped it out. No, he said, okay, I'm going to take lessons 8 hours a day for the next 3 months. And that'll mean the same as equivalent of 5 years or whatever it was. And the guy tried doing that. It was like, this is ridiculous. You can't take in that information. You have to take it in. You have to let it distill within you. You have to get it into your fingers, out of your head, into muscle memory, and all these kind of things. And there's no fast route to it. There's just no fast route to it. You have to put in the time over time, and we're so impatient nowadays we want to learn everything right now. And so this guy was trying to get in a fast lane on it. And that was the way his career was and all. He thought, oh, I can just, if I pay money and just put in the hours right now, I can compress this time thing. And next year I'll be on the stage playing along. And it just doesn't work like that. I thought that was an interesting,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of different things that really taught me about learning, how to learn quickly, how to learn well. And also, with jazz music, in a way, you really have to be in the moment. You can't be thinking about something else. You can't be thinking about, I got to go pick up milk. I forgot to go to the laundry. Everything will fall apart, right? You have to actually be totally zen and in the moment and really immediately and a little bit advanced, because you have to anticipate what the next thing is. If you don't think, you're going to lose it. So you're always in this flow state, a little bit ahead of where you are now. So you're anticipating where the next thing is going to go. So it's a lovely practice, for a meditative practice of how do I stay right here, right now, in the moment, and also to try to craft and make something beautiful. Just to try to make something beautiful, something pretty, something or edgy, or whatever it's going to be, but really try to extract some type of art, some type of emotional experience from something that's as ephemeral as music in the moment. Once I stop playing, the music is gone. So it's really, on a lot of meta levels, it's just really fantastic thing. For me, it's been a wonderful thing to have a practice like that, to just something that is like the Zen monks say, chop wood, carry water kind of thing, where you're just really doing a practice and trying to get better and not criticizing yourself, but also listening and saying, yeah, that didn't really make the mark I want to try to make. Because if you're going to get better, you have to be honest and not think, I'm the best player that ever was. So it's a balance between enjoying it and also searching, always
Mhm.
searching.
All right. Thank you for that. So let's get into the meat of the unconventional wisdom. So, what's one piece of conventional business wisdom that you followed early on, only to later realize that it really was not right for you?
Kim, in school, we all come up through school, right? And in school, the big thing you learn is not to fail, right? It's like you take tests, you sit there, you learn the stuff, you take a test, you want to do good on that test. You have to do good on that test. Otherwise, and that's how you're measured. And so suddenly when you get out of school and that's your mindset, and then trying to do businesses starting basically, there's a Latin phrase ex nihilo, which means from out of nothing, a philosophical term. And that's really what entrepreneurship is. And that's what I wanted to be, was an entrepreneur. After I became an engineer, and I really wanted to make technical products and businesses and things. And when you're starting to do that, when you're making something, the first time you make something is in your mind. It's a vision, an idea. And then you want to make it into something concrete. And that transition, translation from a product of mind to a product that's actually tangible in the world, is really the challenge. And you're going to fail along the way. Your first idea is not going to be suddenly pop out of your mind like Athena popped out of Zeus's head, fully formed kind of thing, and be perfect. You have to be comfortable with what we call failure and not even thinking of a failure. It's an iterative process of making a bunch of mistakes and then learning from those mistakes. You do something, you figure out what the feedback is, and then you refine your thing and you keep doing that in an iterative process. And that's the important thing, is not to think of it as failures. Thomas Edison said, I didn't fail. I found out 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. And that's really the kind of thing that you have to think about, is you try something and then it doesn't really meet your expectations, or it certainly doesn't meet the expectations of what you hope your market is and the people that are going to buy your thing. And so little by little, you have to keep refining it and refining it, and figuring out when you're going to pivot or persevere in those kind of things. And it's just a constant process. So really getting over thinking that success meant never failing, and trying to think that success means failing a lot, and failing fast, and learning from those type of things that didn't work, and then moving forward in some sort of refining kind of process. And I think that was the conventional wisdom that I had to overcome, and just get comfortable with failing fast, failing forward, and just keep on going and not stopping. Churchill said success is going from failure to failure and not losing enthusiasm. That's
Right.
basically what it is. So I think that that was a big thing for me, was just getting comfortable with it not being perfect.
Yeah, that is, I think, always a hard thing, the not being perfect part. I think for some people, so I'm a big advocate and have pretty deep knowledge on DISC, which, and for those of you who don't know, DISC is an assessment that measures your natural tendencies and preferences towards behavior, right? There are some disc styles where facts and so forth, they just don't play on you that much, right? You just don't care too much about that. But there are other styles where the thought of failing or not being right, it just hits you harder, right? And it's really hard to, I think, move beyond that, right? Not take it personally, right?
That's the thing, is not taking person. What is DISC? Is DISC an acronym for?
Yeah, so D stands for, they're just the four styles. D stands
Uh-huh.
for dominance, I stands for influence, S stands for stability, and C stands for conscientiousness.
Oh, nice.
So my guess would be, if you took a DISC assessment, you would be in the C category. And why do I say that? The conscientiousness, because that language around wanting to be right is language that is most often associated with a C style, because it's a high priority, right? Getting it right. Engineers tend to be in that category. Yeah, it's a super interesting way of just looking at your own behavior and your communication with other people. It's very fun.
Yeah, figuring out people's personalities in those ways is really, because we have different people have different proclivities for how they're going to act and respond to the world. And the more that we can understand different people, then we can communicate better. If you, oh, this
Right.
person is this kind of style, I'll frame things in this way, then we can communicate better. Because I
Right.
think at the end of the day, communication is just so critical. And a lot of times we end up talking past each other in ways because we have different frames of reference. And so that's really interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard of that style, but I
Yeah.
really I like that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And I think you just intuitively understand the context for it. It is a tool to use for better communication. The other way, and it's interesting, right? Because you're training, you run an MBA program, right? And we're teaching a lot of skills, but often not how to navigate through corporate environments or companies, right? And one of the things that I find in the work that I do is that if you can understand where somebody else is coming from, then and you don't take it so personally, there's a lot more room there to be able to build a good culture in a company.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of really interesting uses for it.
And also in negotiating, which is a key thing of how to negotiate with another party. You have to understand where they're coming from really in order
Right.
to craft some sort of a good agreement and all. Yeah. So that's just great. It's interesting. Corporate culture and all that, little by little, my career or my life arc has been moving further and further away from corporate culture and corporate life. I started out as an engineer and went to MIT and studied electrical engineering and things, and then worked for a number of countries, but ended up at American Broadcasting Company, ABC, in the heyday of television in the 1980s. And that was a wonderful job, but I started to really chafe through the time. I worked there for a decade. And it was really hard for me to be in a job where people told me totally what to do, told me where I was going to go to do it and things like that. And I was doing great, fun things. I was sports and news were I was in the broadcast operations and engineering part. And so we put on all of the shows. And so it was Wide World of Sports and World News Tonight and space shuttle launches and Olympics and all kinds of fun things, Indianapolis 500 and really great. I was in my 20s. It was like the pinnacle of that type of thing for a guy my age. And I loved it, but I just chafed at that so much. So finally, I bailed and went back to business school and got my MBA. And then what I wanted to do was make my own companies. I wanted to make technical companies. And so I started doing that. And I didn't want a boss anymore. And I told my dentist the other day, I haven't had a boss since the Friday of Memorial Day weekend, 1988. It was the last. I was done with that. And I thought that was a fantastic achievement. But then over the next couple of decades, I started to make some companies, had partners, employees, big customers, investors. And little by little, I got tired of each one of those components. Investors, all they want you to do is make money for them. They don't care about anything else. And they're ruthless towards that. And so I felt that they were putting me in positions where I couldn't do my own thing. And then having partners, also a lot of problems. I had some good partners. I had some terrible partners. And once you start making money, people get funny. And suddenly things would go astray. And then having employees, oh my gosh, it's like babysitting a lot of times. Everybody has their whiny this and that, and everybody thinks they're doing more than they're getting credit for. And I'm being facetious now, but these are the things that the parts of it that I didn't like. I love the part about mentoring people, having them grow. I love the part about collaboration and having partners and all. But these kind of things it's like I needed to do everything myself. And I've realized that as anything that I delegate away, that part of a business tends to atrophy for me. They're doing it. I don't need to know about it. And later, what do you mean it's not working right? It's like, I should have done it. And I actually love every part of business. So I like to do it myself. So little by little, I got rid of partners, investors, employees, large customers because they tend to be the tail wagging the dog. They all have what they want the product or service to be. And I want it to be a little bit different. And I've only been able to do that because the technology has allowed me to, like you said, 167 countries. I have students. I couldn't be a global company by myself without the internet and tools like this that we're using right now. So everything now is digital downloads. I have no working capital in my companies, and there's no accounts receivable. People pay, they get the download, they get the course or the book or whatever it is. And so it's a very simple business part, but it's also very powerful. I can market to that long tail of people all around the world that are interested in what I have to say and not have to be geographically tied to one specific area or something. And so it's been really a wonderful time for me to enact my vision of what I wanted to be able to do. And I could only do it with all these incredible technical tools that we have available now. It's
Mhm.
a wonderful time to be alive, and it's just been
Yeah.
great.
All right. So you've had a lot of success. You've said you've had some failures, but you've also had a lot of success. What's one thing that people assume that you've got all figured out, but inside you still wrestle with it?
That's a great question. I think for me, especially, is focus. I think I've had all that kind of clarity on what to focus on and things, but it's really a challenge. I'm very much seduced by the next bright, shiny thing. Whatever it is, oh, that's a great idea. Oh, that's a great idea. And really trying to focus on one thing that I'm going to do. And I even wrote a book about focus because a lot of the books that I've written about things that interest me about maybe my challenges, and then I try to go and research it and then write it down and then see if it's meaningful to anybody else. But first and foremost, it's here's something that's a challenge to me. So how do I focus better? What does focus mean and all? And there's a great quote of Steve Jobs that said that he thinks focus is focusing on that one thing and all, but it's really about saying no to the hundreds of other really enticing ideas that come up along the way. He said, I'm most proud of the stuff that we didn't do as much as the things that we have achieved. And
Mm.
I really took that to heart. And I think that's part of real focus is the ability to say no. It's like Ulysses, you're going to tie yourself to a mast and not pay attention to the sirens that are going to dash you on the rocks. You really have to stay focused. And that can be a challenge to do that. There's another concept, via negativa, which is about the negative road, the things that you say no to, basically, the things that you peel away. And I really tried to do a lot of that, tried to get rid of bad habits or habits that were less than optimal to try to focus on the good thing. I think we can get a lot further, I found in my life, by instead of trying to focus on some strength or some kind of positive thing, eliminate a negative thing. And if you can eliminate a negative thing in your life, whatever it is, that gives you a lot of optionality then to move forward, and it lightens you up and strips away things that are maybe helped us at one time, but no longer serve us, or we're never any good and we know it, but we're negotiating with comfort in a way not to give up whatever that poor habit is. And so those things have been really, I think that's been the thing, is try to focus. And then how do I focus? I think Warren Buffett said too, so the most successful people say no most of the time to everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually written a book. It's with the editor at the moment.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Congratulations. That's
yeah,
excellent.
thank you. And I have a chapter on saying no in the book, and it was interesting because the editor, he's that's my favorite chapter. And I do think the part of what I always address is how to do it, right? I think there's the you definitely justification for why you need to do it. Then I think I always find that there's a bit of a gap between what we know and what we actually execute on. So I'm infinitely fascinated by that, by how to get movement, right?
Yep.
Then again, I'm a business coach. That's really not a huge leap, right? That's interesting to me.
No, absolutely. And it's true that the things that we know and then the things that we do, and the things that we say, the things that we do, and the things that we say we do are three different things.
Exactly. And I think in the end, for me, I'm a big fan of authenticity, right? So, one of the reasons why I started the podcast and why we have these conversations is really because there's so much information out there through social media, through books, through popular culture, through what happens in business, that there's a lot of shoulds, right? So you should do it this way. And if you want to be successful, this is what it looks like, right? And then I think what happens, the other side of that is that here's my sort of famous to me, right? Famous line that I always use, or not line, but description. It's okay. So somebody gives you the 5-step process to get whatever it is that you're seeking, right? And what happens if you can't do step 3? You just don't get to have the kind of success or whatever outcome you were looking for. I don't like that answer, John. I don't like it, right? So
I totally agree.
yeah, so I've really thought a lot about okay, so that's fine. What do you do with that? Right? How do you figure that out then? Right? If you're committed to the outcome and those steps don't work for you, where do you go from there?
That's a great point. And I think what you just said, the committed to I think this is like the crux of life. Learning is, and the path is when you're committed to the outcome, you know what the outcome is, there's many ways to get there. And especially if you're going to try to be stuck by some recipe that maybe step three of that's not for me, and you feel what you can't get there, that's wrong. Yeah. And so I
Yeah.
think that's for each of us, that authenticity of finding out what works for us, because we're all different. Like you said, the disc type of thing, we're all different. So we're all going to have different paths, different ways to get to where we want to go. And it's not just even the getting to that goal, but being committed to the outcome and that whole process in the middle of how do I get there? This didn't work. Maybe I have to go this way, or this doesn't work. Maybe I like to do this. Let me try this for a while. And even following those small little voices that we have that we don't even know why, but as we pull on that thread, it turns out to be, oh my gosh, that turned out to be a key thing that I didn't really realize, but somehow my internal self knew that was going to be an important part of it. I look back, it's just amazing how many things that seemed tangential or superficial or orthogonal to where I was going, but I was interested in some reason, turned out to be key. And only in retrospect can you really connect those dots and see, oh yeah, that led to this, led to that. We were all groping our way into the future. And we have to be comfortable with that, trusting ourselves, that authenticity to ourselves, trusting ourselves that we know the right way and just let it unfold. And that reveals our own truth to ourselves, which is really just a lovely thing to do if we're
Right.
patient with the process and just enjoy the process. Not like, I got to get to that goal because that's once I get to that goal, it's going to solve all my problems and I'll be happy. And that never happens for us either, right? It's just, those
Yeah.
things don't.
Oh, John, you know how many people's bubbles you just burst?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Pop a little pin.
Yeah. All right. So, what is something that you had to earn in order to have the success that you have today?
I'm a big fan of just in general unlearning. The guy who wrote Future Shock, I can't think of his name right now, but he said the illiterate of the 21st century is not going to be the people who can't read, but it's going to be the ones that can't learn fast, unlearn, and relearn.
Yeah.
And gosh, we're moving so fast. That's so key that we have to be able to unlearn things and not hold on to something because it's a sunk cost. Once we learn it, we can't say, I spent so much time learning that, I can't give that up now. That's one of my major beliefs. We have to be able to, in light of new information or something. There's a great metaphor for that I love. I think it's from the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance book. And it was this Philippine monkey trap. And they make a barrel with a little hole in it that a monkey can fit his hand through. And inside of there's a coconut. And the monkeys love the coconuts. And so when they grab the coconut, they can't get their hand back out because now their hand's bigger than the hole. And they will stand there with their hand on it. They won't relinquish that coconut to get away. They will stay there until they're caught by, that's the trap. It's a trap that they can let go of, they can get out of, but they won't do it. And I think for me, that's been a great metaphor for unlearning. It's like stuff that, oh my gosh, I can't change that because that's something I spent a decade learning how to do. And I'm really good at that. And even if it's not serving me anymore or if it's marginalized, that's what I know. And so that continual process of shedding that skin and relearning things is something that I try to do constantly is just reset my beliefs no matter in light of new information and just
Right.
continually do that.
You know what's interesting about that to me is that it's something that I have a personal practice that I've started and find myself doing it very frequently with my clients is that we get in this place when we go to solve for something, either a personal thing or a business problem, we start from the place of our belief and then we solve from there. And what I think as a coach, I am challenging that belief, right? Because that may be the right place, right? To solve from how the story that you're telling yourself about whatever challenge you're having. But sometimes the issue is not the challenge, the issue is how you're thinking about it, that you've brought your story into it and you have framed the problem in a particular way that if you examine your own story and your own beliefs, you may actually be able to look at it in a very different light, right? I'm going to give you a really quick example. I think that for anybody who's listening, if you want to pay attention to this, here's a great place to start. If you find that you're triggered by something that somebody said, something that somebody did, a situation. It can be personal or in business. And your reaction to that, whatever happened, is, if you really look at it, is by far bigger in proportion to what actually happened. Instead of starting with, how do I respond to that person? How do I deal with that irritation? You are much better served to say, wow, that was a really big reaction to something that was not that, if I really objectively look at it, was not that egregious. So, what is that about? Right? Because it may still be something that you need to respond to or a business problem that you need to solve, but you're going to solve it better if you really understand what your own triggers were around it. And what, again, I think I like the frame of, what story are you telling yourself about what that
Yep.
meant?
I totally agree with you. Instead of, like you say, being reactionary and saying, "Oh, that person is a jerk. What they it made me mad." I had a big reaction to that and started interrogating your own beliefs
Right.
that maybe that are holding you back. Because that whole thing about what got us here isn't going to get us there where we want to go. We have to be willing to interrogate those and change those beliefs, because everything is motivated by our set of beliefs, whether it's around money, whether it's around success, whether it's around love, all kinds of things. Those beliefs can be limiting to us if we're not willing to really interrogate them and not, in a way, not take personally our own personal
Yeah,
situation.
really. Exactly.
Have some
Uh,
emotional distance. Yeah.
All right, let me ask you just a couple more questions here. What's one unconventional habit or mindset shift that's helped you grow your current business?
One thing is that being obsessed with growth, I think that's a thing that a lot of people aren't entrepreneurs. That's a metric, but that can actually be, I found, a vanity metric. My revenue grew by triple last year or something like that, when it's really about how much money went to the bottom line. What was the profit? Is it better to have $1 million in revenue and have spent 1,200,000 in expenses, or to basically have 500,000 in revenue and only 100,000 of expenses? What's the better business model? So growth can be a seductive thing that can be mistakes. What I've been trying to do a lot is to think about what I can eliminate, how I can make things simpler, and try to trim things down and not make them as complex. And because a lot of times it's like focus. Complexity is seductive, and but simplicity scales. And that's what I like to think about, is how can I scale? And scaling in a way, not in some sort of, in a way that I can actually reach more people. I want to reach more people and try to make an impact, even if it's just a small impact, just a little inflection. I think for me, that's what my goal is, not to make any more money and things like that, or although that's how we keep score in a business, but how many people can I make an impact on? And just even a small one, because even a small inflection in someone's path, if you start out from Los Angeles and off by 1 degree with a boat and you go to Asia, by the time you get there, you're going to be off by a massive amount. So a small inflection over time can really be, very important. So that's what I'm trying to do, is just to slim things down. And that's been my mind shift, is to,
Hmm.
make things simpler, make things clearer, get away from complexity.
Love that. All right, I have one last question for you, and it's really about imposter syndrome. So the question is, if you are going to feel it these days, what would be the circumstance that might come up that you would be triggered, and how do you get yourself back moving forward again?
Well, yeah, imposter syndrome. I would say right off the bat that the imposter syndrome, I think of, is, like they say, techie people say, it's not a bug, it's a feature. It's something that it signals, like you're saying, looking for that signal. I think it's a real thing and not something to, a lot of times I used to take the advice of trying to change my self-talk, put all my credentials are and all those kind of things, and try to talk myself out of imposter syndrome. And I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and darn it, people like me, kind of thing. And instead of that, what I've come to the conclusion, now, is to be on a more grounded way, is think of imposter syndrome is, to a degree, we're right. None of us know everything. And so what happens is we get into this internal dialogue measuring it against the externalities and think, oh my gosh, I'm not up to this task. People are going to find out that I don't know what I'm doing. And then I'm going to be discovered and humiliated and all this stuff. And I'm just an imposter. How could I? And instead of that, it's, I don't know everything. There's a thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people that know very little overestimate what they know, and people that know quite a bit underestimate what they know because they're at the point where there's so much to know. I'm really not sure about this that much. And in a way, the optimal thing is not to either overshoot or undershoot the mark, but to just say, yeah, I don't know everything. And when I think one of the most powerful things you can say is just, I don't know, and I'll find out. I don't know. That's a good point you brought up or whatever. Let me go find out and I'll get back to you. I don't know. And not try to bluster our way through and make believe that we know it when we don't, because then you're not on firm ground. So the Dunning-Kruger effect basically says that if you don't have the imposter syndrome, this is sort of an inverse way to think about it. If you don't have the imposter syndrome, that would indicate that you really don't know very much because you're confident in what you know when you don't know. If you are suffering from imposter syndrome, that's a good sign that you know more. You're over the peak of Mount Stupid. And so now you know things that you realize you don't know everything. And so that's a good signal to yourself. And there's a Socratic kind of humility in that too. Socrates, the Oracle at Delphi said Socrates is the smartest guy in the world. And he was like, I'm not the smartest guy. I don't know that much. And he went around and questioned everybody and realized that everybody else, as he did the Socratic method on them, realized that they didn't know what they were talking about. And he was the only person who knew that he didn't know anything. And that was why he was considered the smartest person. So if you have that sort of Socratic humility that you don't know everything, you know some things enough to be helpful in this situation, and then whatever it is that comes up, if you stay curious, if you stay flexible of mind, then you can go and learn that thing and then be helpful in that way, but not at that moment to try to finagle some sort of fake it till you make it answer. And I think that, like you say, authenticity, and that builds credibility and honesty. If you're like, you know what, I actually never thought of that, so let me go find out and I'll get back to you, is I think a much better way to be than to try to be secretly panicking that you're going to be found out because you don't know everything. No one knows everything. Even if we did in 50 years, the things that we are positive about now, we'll look back on and say, oh gosh, how naive those people were 200 years ago. Now we know more. So I think we have to have that sort of strong convictions loosely held, where we're confident about our answers and things, but we're willing to change our convictions in light of new information, a Bayesian kind of statistical thing.
Right. Oh, well, you know what, John, that is a perfect note to end on here. I love that thought. You have all been listening to Unconventional Wisdom About Conventional Wisdom. I'm your host, Kim Miller-Hershon. John Cousins has been giving us a lot to think about today, which we super appreciate. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. John, his website will be in the show notes. He's got an MBA program if you want to check that out. Like we said, he's got a lot of books, so you can check those out too. For me, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. We talk a lot about what we just talked about here, and it's action oriented. And it's one thing, not 5 things. So that's helpful too. If that's interesting to you, please subscribe, and we will see you next time. Go out there and be a better human.
Where cliches come to retire. Drop that beat, turn down